Good morning. That's like the fourth good morning that you've had today. That means it's going to be a good day. I'm Rev Ron Ferris. My pronouns are he and him. And we are All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church, rooted in a community of love. The mission of All Souls UU is to cultivate compassion, foster spiritual connection, and enact transformative justice to heal ourselves and the world. I'm joined this morning by our elementalist, Zane. Thank you for your service today. And as we light our chalice this morning, I just invite you to bring some of what we experienced last Sunday forward, so as to increase the depth of our experience from week to week. So if you remember the beauties that we shared, the beauties that you wrote, and maybe some that you heard, that will stand us in good stead for this morning. Please join me as we come into a moment of full presence. I invite you to ground into a reflective state. As we put words to our gratitude and intention, if you would take a deep breath with me. We give thanks to the grace that weaves our world. We give thanks to our ancestors and the ancestors of this land and all the beings that make and are made by this land. We bid welcome and thanks to all those co-creating this spiritual vessel, those present with and within us, including the sensed and unsensed, and all those who will come after. May our time here be rooted in love and expressed in our shared values. May it yield something nourishing, beneficial, and connective. This is our collective intent, and we ask what grace is open to influence, to hear our prayer as the hope of all here gathered. Amen.
As we prepare for the offering, I'd like to draw your attention to the yellow cards in the pews, in the pew backs in front of you. If you find yourself in a situation that could use some care from one of our lay pastoral ministers, please fill out a card and place it in the offering plate as it passes, or you can also contact Justin Lincoln, who is our lay pastoral minister today. Regarding our offering, each month we are pleased to be able to partner with organizations whose values dovetail with our own. This month, we are sharing the collection plate with Inside Out Youth Services. Inside Out Youth Services is a day sanctuary for our LGBTQ2IA+ youth between the ages of 13 to 24 years. Inside Out provides discussion groups, drop-ins, leadership opportunities, counseling, food, and clothing to support the well-being of disenfranchised youth in our community. They also provide adult workshops to train parents and youth service adults to advocate for our youth in the community. All Souls will devote our plate sharing to this organization, and our sponsor is the Dismantling Racism team. There are directions for sharing your donation in the chat today. If your collection plate donation is a pledge payment, please write pledge on the donation envelope or the memo line on your check, and we'll apply your donation toward your pledge instead of the share. The offering will now be gratefully received. Thank you for your generosity. I am sure I was taught lessons about fairness throughout my growing up, but I don't quite remember those lessons. I do remember a time in my professional life when I was treated unfairly. I was a probationary teacher, and I had a new rookie principal and assistant principal were hired. I'm going to spare you some of the details regarding that. Needless to say, several of us who were in our third year of probationary time were non-renewed. There were multiple things that showed me that red flags were going up, that someone was going to take the hit. Needless to say, the principal and assistant principal tried a variety of ways to make life difficult for those of us they were non-renewing. They were hoping we would resign. I thought about legal action, but decided it was not worth the emotional energy it would take. I was a single parent with 2 middle schoolers, and I needed a job in the fall. I sought advice through the association representing teachers, but they could not help me because I was probationary. They did give me some suggestions. The principal pressured me to resign, even calling me during spring break at home, rather than let it go to non-renewal. The reason I learned through others was they wanted to offer my position to the 22-year-old they had hired that year. Bit of age discrimination, perhaps. Both admins attempted some other nefarious actions or pressures during that fourth quarter of that year. So I got my letters of recommendation from my previous principals and also a superintendent from a previous district and from my teammates. Then from the admin, I requested a letter explaining the reasons for my non-renewal. When I read it, I realized that they were willing to make up reasons. Even though they offered to give me a referral, I knew I couldn't trust them. So what did I learn through this experience? Now looking back, it's over 15 years ago. First, I found my kernel of power by maintaining my integrity while frustrating their plans. By not resigning, they couldn't legally offer the job to the other teacher. But she did get a job at a middle school, and she did that because of their indecision. I wrote a 4-page letter outlining the events to the superintendent and had a meeting not with her, but with the director of elementary ed. When the director said she didn't think she could get my job back, I said that I simply wanted to make sure this didn't happen to anyone else in the future. My other teammates at our grade level worried about me, but I returned to teach my final quarter at that school, realizing there was nothing else admin can do to me. I had one of the best quarters of teaching, including setting up labs for 130 students in a portable building to dissect squid, because my teammates were willing to reschedule their week around the labs to accomplish it. And also offering an after-school opportunity for my science fair students to participate in a space program I had been given as a result of my recognition at the regional science fair as middle school teacher. So what happened? What was the outcome? In July, I did get a teaching job in a district that had a strong union and a master agreement, and spent 15 years there before I retired. Also, I heard from my former teammates that summer after I left, there was a shakeup in the admin team at my former school. The principal, who had been overwhelmed, had been reassigned to a smaller school, and there was a new principal who had a lot more experience. It took a year, but the assistant principal was terminated at the end of the next school year after working with this new principal. And then, almost 2 years later, I met that new principal. He didn't know me, I didn't know him, of my previous school at a science conference in Denver. We had a pleasant conversation, and they were having a good giveaway at the company he was representing, so I put my name in for it. I never win. Well, lo and behold, at the end of that conference day, I found out I had won the 3D Doodler pen. So was it coincidence? I don't know. But I had my integrity, and I knew I had some power, and I used it.
All right. So as most of you know, last summer, our Association of Congregations officially adopted a revised set of values. You can see them up here on the screen. For those new to our tradition, you could think of our values sort of as our central tenets. Tenets. Though really, they are more accurately thought of as a set of promises based on observation. In other words, our values are a covenant emerging from an ontology. Ontology, remember, is the study or words about being, words about reality. So these are promises that align with reality as we understand it. For reality as we understand it is fundamentally good. Again, not necessarily safe, but rooted in love. Reality, as we see it, is evolutionary. And in aggregate, evolution selects for, if not cooperation, then for mutuality, for ecology. So in that evolutionary reality, we have found that justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity are critical to building a beautiful society, a beloved community, a vibrant ecology, and a personal soul connection to a meaningful world. So a helpful way to remember these values is our friendly neighborhood acronym, JETPIG. Justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, generosity. We observe that these are fundamental patterns, these values, that actually evolution selects for, and behaviors, these values, that we best aspire to in order to align with an evolutionary paradigm that is good. Again, the fundamental observation here is that life and evolution are inextricable and, in aggregate, good. And yet we also find that not everything is in alignment with evolution. Namely, at the moment, us, humanity. And it's because evolution is life's eternal and necessary creative partner that being out of alignment with evolution is anti-life. And a society built on this misalignment is a self-terminating one. And we live in that society. We live in a self-terminating society. The forces of human self-interest are currently mitigated by nothing but our own myopia, which is to say, the only limit is our own extinction. These forces of self-interest only exist in a well of fear, in our own hearts, that collectively create a culture that ignores externalities or any cost to anyone but our own withered souls. We just ignore that. It is not reciprocal, it is not cooperative, and it is out of line with evolution. Now, counterculturally, our Unitarian Universalist values, centered on life, rooted in love, must transform the anti-life forces of the world and in our own hearts. Transform them into an integrated and reciprocal ecology of other interestedness. Interest in the other, not self-interest. And so begin to do that, we make promises. And these promises help us conduct ourselves and offer us guidance. They help remind us and measure our integrity. We make promises to ourselves and to one another and to the world as aspirations, these promises, and as accountabilities. Our promises, our covenant, our values remind us how to act. Our promises measure our actions or their absence. So this morning, I want to get curious about some of the promises that emerge from one of our newly adopted values. We hold as a promise the value of integrity to remind us and measure us. Of equity, the value of equity to remind us and measure us. So equity is sometimes a confusing word, and it is a word that has become rather a hot button in this misguided age of dismantling DEI initiatives. So what is equity? It's one of our values. We best have an idea about it. Okay, so have you ever been to an event of some kind with your kid or your niece or your younger sibling or something, and they couldn't see what was going on because they were shorter than everybody else? So what did you do? You put them on your shoulders, right? Of course you did, because you loved them. You put them on your shoulders so they could see. That was an act of equity, right? In doing so, you would have just defied the felon-in-chief and his puppet makers by engaging in a little bit of familial DEI. You have just joined the Rebel Alliance. Keep it up. By the way, as an aside, you all know this. Scapegoating DEI initiatives is the most weak-willed, cowardly, crybaby excuse for one's own... Hang on. I'm just getting to the good part. I was going to say existential impotence, which I like that phrase. I want to say it again. Scapegoating DEI initiatives is the most weak-willed, cowardly, crybaby excuse for one's own existential impotence I have ever heard. And every time I hear someone criticizing DEI, I only hear them exposing their own lack of self-confidence and self-esteem. And I don't know whether to damn them or pity them. Maybe another good way, moving on, of understanding equity is to compare it to equality, right? With which it is often confused. So unlike equality, which means providing the same to all, equity recognizes that not everyone starts from the same place and requires adjustments to the imbalances for mutual thriving. So the difference between equity and equality is that whereas equality gives everyone the exact same resources across the board, regardless of actual needs or resources already provided to them, equity recognizes that each person has a different circumstance, meaning different resources must be allocated based on individual needs for us all to flourish. And if you could show that slide there, you can see a lovely illustration of the difference between equity and equality here. So it's not necessarily the one that you've seen before, the fences with the people standing on boxes. This is a little bit more nuanced, I think, because everybody has different abilities, everybody has different sizes. That other one privileged tall people. Nothing. So, equity is not a zero-sum game. It's not that someone disadvantaged gets more, so someone relatively advantaged gets less. more or less job opportunities, for instance. Rather, it means that each gets what they need according to their needs, so as many people as possible can participate. So equity shifts our orientation from competition to compassion. And I suppose it's not an all times proposition. There are times when, for various reasons, competition is valuable because it is either fun or refining. But even in sports, right? Rules are put into place. That's the ultimate competition. Obviously a competition, there's a winner, there's a loser, but rules are still put in place to make the competition more equitable. Right? You can't, there's a face mask without the rule that you couldn't grab the face mask, right? That makes the competition better and it makes it safer and more competitive. Equity actually can make things more competitive if competition is your bag, right? So our UU values are even more precise when it comes to equity. Under the value of equity in our Article 2 of our bylaws, the text reads, "We declare that every person is inherently worthy and has the right to flourish with dignity, love, and compassion. We covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities." So you got the value and the promise. Now, I still wince at the word worthy and will until our culture and world is no longer organized around capitalism and consumerism. I wish that they had used holy instead of worthy. I'm a minister, so I'm drawn to those words. But maybe you are too. So it would be like, we declare that every person is inherently holy. And that's how I'm going to be saying it from now on. So we say that because everyone is inherently holy, that everyone has the right to flourish. And what does that flourishing entail? Well, it entails a dignity of being radiating from our very hearts and into the hearts of those near to us. That radiation from our hearts is nothing less than the vibration of love. An investment of self into the interest of others that feeds both its origin and its destination. It warms your heart as it warms the heart of others as they warm your heart. So acting from that dynamic is called compassion. Compassion is identifying with another, with their suffering, yes, but also with their joy. Compassion is the heart of a world based on reciprocality and mutual hope. And in such a world, it would be impossible not to foster accessibility and inclusivity. So, accessibility and inclusivity are the tests of our compassion and our love and our dignity. They are the material measure of equity. We haven't even started playing with the big fun question in the heart of this value of equity. We do not declare that every human is inherently worthy. The value does not say human, it says person. Is it possible that there is a distinction? After all, what is a person? Animist cultures believe that personality or personhood exists in all things, right down to rocks and the earth itself. And we declare that every person is holy. So your spiritual anthropology need not be so broad for the value of equity to impact your life, but I'm going to suggest that the broader your spiritual anthropology, the broader and more profound the impact. What is a person? Does a deer have personhood? Does a bird? What about a creek? or clouds or the basil in your herb garden? What if they did? How would that change your relationship? How would it change you? How would it change the world? After all, equity does not only come to life in accessible architecture and inclusive bylaws, as important as those things are. Equity is at its beginning and end, rather, a spiritual practice. Equity decenters the self. It compels our attention onto the other and implies a kind of empathy, and this is all important, for without empathy, none of this would matter. Without empathy, we'd be in an awful situation of a zero-sum game where atop a pyramid of narcissists sits a terrified mega-narcissist, constantly looking over their shoulder at the masses of the rest of us, frustrated and angry narcissistic jerks who want what they have. Everyone looking for advantage like crabs in a bucket, and we go to hell in a handbasket. And that is terrifying. It is also familiar. And so promising equity is medicine for that. Equity is the what to do about it of empathy. Empathy decenters the self and so becomes aware of interdependence and pluralism, our values. Equity is an act of generosity and transformation, our values. It is the response to pluralism when pluralism is rooted in love. And so you begin to see the interrelatedness of our values. Equity is a path. It opens our heart and outpours our souls to remember the world as it truly is, beautiful, alive, evolving, and vibrating with spirit, relationship, and meaning. Equity is a spiritual path. As Unitarian Universalists, we declare loudly, consistently, and faithfully. Tomorrow, by the way, at the courthouse, we will declare this loudly, consistently, and faithfully, that every person is inherently holy and has the right to flourish with dignity, love, and compassion. We therefore covenant to use our time, our wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities. So rooted in love, grounded in equity, we align with the patterns of life, open our hearts, refine our behavior, and bring about a beloved and community in accord with a beautiful world. As we leave this sacred time and place that we have made together with our presence, our intention, our collected holiness, let us do so, remembering what we've done together. We've welcomed people into our community, celebrated a beloved staff transition. We've sung and meditated, listened to some good words, hopefully. So as we go from this place, let us go knowing that equity is a spiritual path, and it opens your heart and the world to you and to the whole community. Let us go in peace and let us go singing.